The world of geopolitics is complex. It encapsulates foreign policy, defense, trade, and culture. These can have ripples that can be felt all around the planet.
With that, we welcome you to The Global Detail, a podcast where we go beyond borders and behind the headlines to stories that impact the world.
Our goal is to peel the onion and explore the various diverse layers through riveting interviews with experts and stalwarts. I'm Akshobh Giridharadas.
And co-piloting this journey, I'm Brendan Duke. Let's get into it.
Glamorous, gadfly, gentle, and congenial. These are just some of the adjectives to describe Reham Khan. The name reverberates around the subcontinent, where she's known as a provocative journalist, passionate about causes, and pugnacious about injustice.
In addition to this, she also has the distinction of being the ex-wife of the current Pakistani Prime Minister, Imran Khan. If that weren't enough, she made some rather damning claims about her former spouse in her eponymous memoir. She even recently had an attempt made on her life. When the would-be assassins fired on her car in Pakistan, she replied online, "This is Imran Khan's new Pakistan? Welcome to the state of cowards, thugs, and the greedy."
Reham is not just a journalist and the former spouse of the current sitting leader of Pakistan. She's also a social activist, and through the Reham Khan Foundation, advocates for issues such as eradicating child labor.
Adding to that problem is the issue of gender parity, a challenge that seems to vex even the most egalitarian societies. This begs the question, how does one address these issues in a conservative Islamic society such as Pakistan?
So you see, this is unfortunate because, ironically, in a country, as you point out, the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, one would expect particularly issues like child sexual abuse not to exist or to be frowned upon. But actually, it's conversely, it's very difficult to talk about it in a society which has just so many taboos. So back in 2012, when I was broaching this issue, I had to do it rather sensitively and maybe even be careful with the words I chose in public. And so initially, by 2014, 2015, we were calling it the street children issue. And it's only because there is, you can be part of something which is obviously unacceptable and sinful according to religion, but you can't talk about it. To talk about it was sinful, and for a lady to speak about it was completely unforgivable because it was just crossing certain boundaries a polite society sets for you. But as many would understand that I don't really care for people's opinion when I feel strongly about an issue, and child protection. Saving children from child abuse and eradication of child labor, that I feel that this isn't, I'm not doing anyone a favor. I'm just making sure that the world is a better place for my children. I'm a single mom to 3 children, and I know how important it was for me and continues to be, even though they're not children anymore, to have them in a protected atmosphere at home and even outside. And I just think that it's unforgivable for myself as a parent or society as a whole to allow other people's children to be unprotected and not to raise a voice for it. We ultimately have to live in this society. So whatever happens in Pakistan, if children are if there's human smuggling, if there's child trafficking, who's next to us? Of course, India. So the problem is very much something which isn't restricted by borders, and we should be working together on such issues. Fast forward now, I think. The advocacy that Reham Khan Foundation has initiated isn't new for Pakistan, but I think that it's just that I had perhaps a slightly bigger profile than other people. People have been doing a very, very good job, particularly in places like Peshawar, which traditionally has been a hotspot because of being the center of sort of travel. It's for centuries. But there have been social workers, child protection officers, even local bureaucrats who go out of their way to highlight this issue. But I just had a slightly bigger platform than them, and so we've made a little bit of progress because of my journalism background. Things were a little bit easier because I could then smuggle in a very, very important issue into mainstream programs where it's not seen as a problem, and political petty issues tend to give us more ratings, or that's what television and media require you to promote on the 8 p.m. or the 10 p.m. shows. So that helped me a bit. We've had a huge response from volunteers, and that just goes to show that when you are really passionate about something, and you just live and breathe that, and that every conversation that I have, it's very much a part of my life. So any place that I go to, I will perhaps people might get fed up, but I do talk about it wherever I get the chance. Every conversation, every television program, any film script that I'm writing, any article, I do not waste any opportunity for highlighting the issue of child abuse, and that has really worked, because a lot of people have been attracted to the idea that they can change the world every single time they write something, or the choice of words, and so I've been very encouraged by a very positive response, particularly in Pakistan, and Pakistani youngsters.
An estimated whopping nearly 23 million children aged between 5 and 16 are out of school. Given the importance of primary education as an edifice in all societies, this severely impacts Pakistan's posterity, its economic outlook, and room for growth.
Reham spoke about her efforts to enhance children's education, particularly young girls in Pakistan. She also went on to address how the lack of basic education contributes to the problem of radicalization in the region.
In terms of what RKF has been doing, I'm a huge fan of what India has done, and I'm very envious of the fact that we have all the brains from Chennai to particularly South Indian bosses dominating IBM and the big four. So one of the things that I wanted to do about 4 or 5 years ago was to bring in computer literacy to Pakistan, Pakistani children. Out of school children in Pakistan, again, these are not accurate figures, but they're pretty depressing. 22.25 million children are out of school in Pakistan, and these are official figures. We expect them to be a little bit higher than that. Out of school children tend to be more in the areas that I belong to, so particularly the tribal belt, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa and Balochistan. Of course, out of school children are the higher number of out-of-school children tends to be girls, and that also in middle school. For obviously, I won't go into details why that is the case. Middle school education in Pakistan, it tends to sort of drop off. The standards really slip. Primary schooling is not so bad. It's not as good as I would like to see it, but middle school is pretty bad. So one of the things which Reham Khan Foundation wants to do is we call it AIM. So A is for advocacy, obviously, which means that I just harp on about it everywhere in personal interactions and public ones. I is for implementation of existing laws, which are pretty, not very impressive, but at least we have Article 25A, which is Pakistan being the first Muslim country to ratify the UN Convention on Child Rights back in 1992, I believe. So Article 25A means that children from 5 to 15 must be in education, that it is the state's responsibility to make sure every child gets education. Again, it's not implemented, so I is for implementation. M is for management. So RKF wanted to make a few model projects to just show governments, provincial governments and local governments, that if I can do this with, say, £100,000, why can't you do that with the aid that you get from DFID, from USAID, and from so many donors. We've had a few political obstacles recently because of that. One of the things that I'm very proud of is making computer labs in areas where the community is engaged and will take ownership of them. So we tend to give 10 to 15 computers in a community, make a computer lab. The idea was to teach the children coding. But when I introduced these, now mind you, these are not in places, far-flung areas like Waziristan. These happen to be pretty much near the motorway networks, and in places which are not only on the very highly publicized CPEC route, which means that they're slightly more educated areas with professionals living in the area, but the children had never seen or handled a mouse. And so, it was just heartbreaking for me to see them handling a keyboard and a mouse for the first time. Of course, we have limited resources at RKF, and I don't really think that it is, when you say that it is a selfless act, I don't see it as that. I see it as a purely selfish act, because I sleep easy if I think one child's life has been saved, or that it can, a child has been given equal opportunities, or an opportunity to get an education, to be able to paint, to be able to become, come out of poverty. So for me, it's purely selfish, because not only that I sleep easy, but you see, the fact that it's such a silly idea to just be investing in your own children, because your children cannot live in isolation. They have to go out, they have to interact with other people, and the world isn't becoming a safer place. We have extremist ideas, radicalization everywhere you go. So, you can't say that Pakistan is unsafe, but say the London underground is safe. Nowhere is safe. And it will only be safe if we understand that we cannot live in isolation, and we can't just be investing in our own children and sending them to Eton or Aitchison. We have to make sure that every child is at least getting a chance to life, and a chance of an education. For many of us, it's a postcode lottery. If my son was not born in my house, where would he be now? So it is directly linked to the opportunity. I do not believe that people are born stars. I think that people can be, they can really be given a chance to shine. And that's what I want to do. And I hope to motivate a couple of you here as well.
It's a domino effect. A lack of education for young children leads to labor issues, where children are forced into bonded labor.
Young children are forced to work as domestic help for little pay, and there is a sense of mistreatment that is prevalent in Pakistan and the subcontinent. Reham elaborated on what she and her foundation are doing to mitigate this crisis.
So one of the things that I was saying that I included in every conversation that I have, even if it is a political interview, or if it's about filmmaking, anything that you say and you do is going to be copied by society. So the best advocacy that one can do is actually live the cause. So, for example, if I go into a restaurant and somebody asks me, comes over and says hello, or asks for a selfie, and if they have a child servant with them, a young maid, behaving like a nanny, I will refuse. And I expected people to be upset with me and cross with me, but people are generally, they're very respectful. And if I say it in a nice way, that you have a child, you've just had a baby, does it make sense? Is it safe to give your child over to a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old girl? And you're losing out on being a parent, the joys of parenting, and you're ruining everyone's lives. The young baby that you've just had, the young child who's behaving forced into domestic labor, and your own joys as a parent. And people are, they do listen. So I'm encouraged by the fact that I've never had a sort of a nasty, reaction or response. If I go into someone's house and I'm served by children, I refuse to eat. And this, as you know, in Islamabad and Lahore, in very educated households, they will provide justification of how it is better for them. To give you a sort of a context, again, this is why the child labor statistics, it's very important that the government completes the survey. They were meant to deliver on the December 2020. They still have not updated them. They say it's in progress. Now I'm getting a little bit worried about it. The last survey that we had, child rights organization CRM reported that it was about 12.5 million children in labor, and half of that, so 6 million of them, are under 10 years old. And that's just a shocking statistic. We estimate it to be closer to 22 million children in child labor in Pakistan. And again, this could be much higher. But even 12.5 million is just an atrocious number. How we can stop it is by changing the mindset in society, by making sure that you criticize the fact that you are employing children, particularly with domestic labor. You might have heard of the Tayyibah story, where the child was abused in the house of a local judge, and that's unacceptable. You can afford to have a fully grown adult working for you. One of the reasons that they employ a child is because the child will be abused, hit, maybe even sexually abused, and cannot complain. Of course, children will work for a lot, for smaller wages than an adult, and a child can be restricted. There are lots of children in Pakistan, of course, if you think about why there is so much recruitment into militancy also, is because if you have 10 children, or even if you have 5 or 6 children, it's very hard to feed them. So children are used to feed the parents, and so this will only be corrected when there are more stronger laws and implementation of those laws. So far, the only law that I think is doing a little bit for labor, but that's for industrial labor, of course, is the Bhatta law in Punjab, where the brick kiln factories. There was huge uproar because, of course, it's related to the business community, but it was a strong thing that was introduced in, I think it was 2015, and that needs to be done. To give you another shocking statistic, is that the abuse of domestic child workers. Again, these are underreported, but 79% of the abuse that child domestic workers suffer, 79% of that is from Punjab, the biggest and the most populous province in Pakistan. And this means that there's cases of abuse, rapes, murders, and again, these are just for the last 10 years reported by one organization. And as I said, that there would be underreporting. Many cases are not reported. There has to be new policy. There has to be. You have to make sure that once this goes to court, there is no political support for people. Obviously, people with a lot of money can buy the outcome of their cases also. So it's how you can help is by becoming a volunteer at any of the child rights organizations, whether it's RKF or CRM. One of the ones that I'm a really big fan of is Sahil, Sahil. They work on statistic collection for sexual abuse. So if you want to volunteer, I'm not sure where you're placed. There are lots of opportunities for you to do so, and we can fill in forms and get you to sort of maybe do this in a more organized fashion. But Sahil, particularly a good, it's a good organization. RKF, of course, you're welcome to join.
The Global Detail spoke with Reham during the height of the COVID-19 outbreak in India in 2021. This served as a stark example that despite both nuclear armed rivals being at loggerheads, there was a common fight against the pandemic.
So it's really quite disturbing, as we said during the intro as well, that both Pakistan and India seem to be struggling alone, and we shouldn't have to struggle alone. There's a popular meme going around in Pakistan, which suggests that both sides separated by a border. One side doesn't have vaccines, which India could have helped with, and the other side doesn't have ventilators, which perhaps Pakistan would have liked to had things been different. But we both have nuclear weapons, and I think in Pakistan, it's been very difficult because we have a variant where younger children are not only contracting the virus, but also dying, which is unusual. It's not something that we've heard in the UK, for example. So ages 5 to 20-year-olds, there is a high incidence of coronavirus in Pakistan. And in India, we have a double mutant virus, which is not apparently not responding to the vaccines that are out there. And of course, the shared problems are like the black market making a killing with the vaccine prices, particularly the vaccines that you need or use for revival, the oxygen supplies. And so, our problems once again are very, very similar. But the solutions, we could have put our heads together. And sadly, as I said, the coronavirus or corona times has re-emphasized where we should have been focusing and where we did not focus.
The COVID conundrum hasn't just been a healthcare debate. The rise of the strongman and autocratic politicians has turned the pandemic into political theater.
Even in the United States, the vaccine debate has seen political polarization between the vaxxers and the anti-vaxxers. But Reham says this is a global trend where the image of the strongman is prevalent.
Coming over to the COVID question and who's to blame for the COVID, I mean, COVID is to blame for COVID. We are to blame for the fact that we have, as you pointed out, it's a very long debate, but identity politics has been exploited across the world, but you see in recent times, very similar to the Zia era, I feel that in India it was used. So I am really nervous about using the religion card or identity politics for the sake of furthering one's own personal vested interests or politics. And I think that's what's happened in India. I think it's regretful, really, because India should have learned from Pakistan. We've made those mistakes. An extreme right-wing ideology doesn't help anyone. Again, it's sad because India is or was supposed to be a secular democracy. So I personally have very fond memories, and I found that depressing. So I think that it's extreme right-wing politics that is to blame everywhere. So I wouldn't say that it's just Modi and just Imran. It's Bolsonaro, it's Macron, it's Trump, it's Boris Johnson, it's Putin, it's everywhere. Everyone has this, reviving the past glory, be it Islam or be it Hinduism or be it white supremacy. And we, the common folk, who are not part of that, we don't gain anything from this exploitation. We just get exploited. We just get poorer. We get killed. And so COVID is just an extension of the times that we were living in. I always give the example of a parent that if you've had a good relationship with your children pre-adolescence, then you will sail through puberty. But if you've had a difficult relationship with the children, then puberty is going to be really difficult for you. And that's what's happened. Countries that did not have infrastructures and competent systems, did not have good leadership, failed during COVID. It just sort of, magnified the situation. But people or leaders who were decisive, who wanted the best for the countries and were not going to be a party to identity politics or extreme right-wing agenda or play in the hands of the superpowers, they did fine. So I think that there's a lesson to be learned. On a positive note, I find that isn't it sad, but also perhaps a silver lining that once the tragedy and the desperately disturbing images came from India, there has been genuine sympathy in Pakistan. So I think that wo hun ko khinchta hai, we don't really hate each other, and I think this tragedy might bring us back together. I know that on the official level as well, there has been a lot of kind hashtags and there has been promotion. So maybe, I'm an eternal optimist, so I'm very hopeful.
Where are you from? 4 simple words to some people, but to others, it raises complex questions on identity, race, culture, and perhaps even gender. At a time when data travels faster than people or planes, why is national identity still given an archaic level of importance?
As a South Asian Muslim woman living in the West, Reham touched on how diversity in the era of overt egalitarianism has to be something more than just a superficial way to check off boxes in certain categories.
Diversity isn't just something that Reham Khan speaks about, it's something that she lives. Born in Libya to a Muslim family, Pakistani by identity, and a British citizen by nationality,
I mean, I'm a fan of diversity, but I'm not a fan of diversity how it's portrayed or how it's paid lip service to, particularly in the West. So we were speaking about before this room as well about the quota system that is sort of you have to look a certain way to sort of tick box that you have an Asian on board or maybe a British Asian on board, and I have a huge problem. I think the problem originates from our societies also, because I think we're not very representative of our own communities, and we are all sorts of shapes and sizes and colors and shades, and that needs to be reflected. One of the things which I loved about your article, by the way, in the Quint, is this class system you talk about, this new class, the liberty that some people have because of what their passport allows them to do, where their passport allows them to travel. Just looking at the passport, how are you perceived? It's not helpful that my surname is Khan and I was born in Libya, and I've spent quite a lot of time in Pakistan, so I can completely relate to the fact that eyebrows are raised. I do have dual nationality, and I love the fact that you say that it shouldn't be, your loyalty shouldn't be questioned. Your connection to your roots and heritage has nothing to do with the color of your passport. The color of your passport just means that you have access, or you have mobility. So you can take the plane and attend a conference in Germany, or attend a concert in the UK, and I find that this is, in this day and age, it's just really it's shocking. I find it unacceptable. I see myself as very much a citizen of the world, so I don't really think that we should be limited by borders and by passports. It's sad. I was a strong proponent for us remaining in the European Union. It provides opportunities for youngsters, particularly for British youngsters. In fact, the European Union hasn't done that badly because of Brexit. Property prices shot up in Frankfurt. A friend of mine was telling me how they've really benefited from a lot of these organizations moving to Europe. And I think the fact that bright young people are limited because of the color of their passport is just unacceptable. We can connect to anyone and any culture now. I mean, look at Clubhouse; it connects us. So I can make friends in Sydney, I can make friends in Florida, and I can make friends in Chennai. Why can I not travel? And again, I think the more borders are opened up, the more trade there is, there will be more peace. It's miraculous how people will promote peace if they have to do business with you. But again, it's for a very limited few people. It's funny how all the Silicon Valley, or say places like IBM, as I said, or Quantel and Vodafone, all the bosses and all the technology is from India. But it's wonderful when they need us, they will import us. But until then, we are looked at with very suspicious questioning at passport controls. And I can completely relate. I refuse to now even fill in diversity forms. I don't want to be pigeonholed. Why are we pigeonholed into being, are you British? Are you British Asian or other? I find that really disturbing. And I think for young males particularly, it is a disturbing thing that on the one hand you want them to be integrated into, say, for example, British society or American society, and then you want to know where they're from. I know for a fact that a lot of people, young men particularly, find it a disturbing thing to be put into these stereotypical little boxes. And I think we should grow up. I think the world needs to grow up. It's 2021. It's time to change.
In light of frustration with conventional means, we brought up the idea of Track 2 diplomacy. This is when people other than official diplomats participate in foreign policy initiatives. India and Pakistan have had several peace initiatives, none of which have borne noteworthy fruit.
Initiatives like Aman Ki Asha, translated as Hope for Peace, were lauded initially, but failed to mitigate the geopolitical tensions. The late South Asia scholar Steve Cohen chronicled the masterpiece Shooting for a Century. This is based on the premise that India and Pakistan will continue to have strained ties for at least a century. At 75 years, it's hard to argue against this.
So we had to ask, is it always a case of one step forward and two steps back when it comes to the dialogue between New Delhi and Islamabad? Given both India and Pakistan have common concerns pertaining to poverty, education, malnutrition, and healthcare, is there a space where social enterprises in both countries can come together using Track 2 solutions? Reham concurred with this theory, albeit with some caveats.
I think that's a very valid point. As when we've always sort of said that we can't resolve the bigger issues, so let's bring in culture and arts and sports. And I have a slightly different opinion about that. You may or may not agree with me, but in recent times, both in Pakistan, but certainly in India, because obviously the media industry is so much more vibrant and so much more organized, and also more affluent and shall we say, influential in India, I find that to drag in artists and to drag in art and culture into into this rather tricky diplomacy has not worked. It's actually backfired, because whenever we have a dispute, these are the areas, whether it's the film industry or whether it's musicians or the arts, they suffer. And I find that there is increasingly a pressure on artists to take sides, which I think is just I just think it's unfortunate. I think artists should not be dragged into it. So yes, I would agree that social enterprise and the fact that I'm a huge supporter of bringing in trade ties and social enterprise could sort of thaw the ice there. I think when you have the European Union model, where you have you used to have a free flow of human resource, people connecting, particularly the youth connecting, I think that really made a difference. The biggest outcome of the European Union, and something which wasn't very celebrated or at least emphasized, was the fact that we had peace, and I think that could be. That could be the solution, or at least the first step to take towards diplomacy. We have, of course, very tricky issues. We have sensitive issues to resolve. But I think more than arts and culture and even sport, social enterprise could be the way forward, because in many ways that's the way forward for how the world will make progress. So yes, I would second that idea.
While speaking about posterity in South Asia, we asked Reham about future change makers passionate about public policy. You see, Pakistan, unlike India, hadn't done away with the zamindar or land ownership rules during its initial years. This created a feudal class of politicians, particularly the Bhuttos of the Pakistan People's Party, the PPP, and the Sharif family of the PMLN, that's the Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz.
Enter Imran Khan, Pakistan's Tom Brady. He won the World Cup at age 40 and is considered Pakistan's GOAT in cricket. He ran on a platform to eradicate corruption from the system and started the PTI.
PTI stands for Pakistan's Tehreek-e-Insaf, which means Pakistan's Movement for Justice. It's often been parodied as Pakistan's turncoat industry, attracting the same old guard from other parties, horse trading the way in for political power.
In Asia, even in India, dynastic clans are prevalent in politics. Even in the West, there is the American tradition of Pale, Male, and Yale, or the British tradition of the Eton, Harrow, Oxbridge class. With this in mind, we asked Reham how young people can triumph in policy in the face of dynastic politics.
So you see, when Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the PTI, was introduced, many people thought that this would be the voice of the middle class, this would be the voice of the youth, and that it would give, ample areas of participation for ample space for women, particularly. And so, just to give you an example, when they were brought into power back in 2018, we had not had a child labor survey at a government level for 24 years. The last one was in 1996. So, the first thing that I was encouraged by was that the president and the human rights minister announced that they would be, there was a lot of pressure by child rights activists, and they promised that there would be a government survey to give us precise statistics on child labor in Pakistan. And now obviously they've been in power for nearly 2.5, close to 3 years. And this survey was meant to be completed by December. As we speak, the survey is ongoing. They have no idea when it will be completed. The fact that we have no statistics makes my job a little bit harder, because I'm sort of having to rely on statistics from 2016, for example. And I know for the fact that these are not accurate, B, there's a lot of underreporting of statistics. So Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, the promises that they made, the manifesto was brilliant, but they haven't really delivered on ground what we would have liked to see. One of the biggest problems, of course, as you highlighted, is the feudal system, and we have a huge problem with Pakistan. And as you rightly pointed out, it's the Pakistani parliament particularly seems sort of like an incestuous lot where, you regardless of which party you belong to, but you're very much part of the same class, and there doesn't seem to be any entry access for people who are not part of that class. I say that people who go to the same school playgrounds, they hang out together in the same coffee shops, and then they happen to end up together, and they end up in parliament together. That means that we don't really see the real representation of the constituencies. So I feel that Pakistani parliament particularly, we need to change the face of the parliament, where you have representatives that match their constituencies. Famously, we've had some very famous, very high-profile politicians in the past, and they used to import their drinking water. And to this day, politicians in Pakistan, parliamentarians in Pakistan, don't actually, literally, do not drink the water that the 20 crore, 222 million people in the country do. Many don't have access to clean drinking water. So if they have no circumstances that match their constituents, you can't possibly expect them to understand the problems, even if they had any intention of doing so. So for me, the solution is very simple, but of course, it would require a huge, a huge shake up to the existing system, particularly for women. I find that with the #MeToo campaign movement in the rest of the world, there has been a lot of talk in media, but have we really achieved anything for women just yet? Sadly, I feel that the access to the power corridors is very limited, but it is particularly limited for women, younger women, or women who are not connected, say they have no family connections. So hereditary politics tends to be a huge problem in Pakistan. I don't see an end in sight. And that is something that the PTI should have addressed, but failed the population in those expectations. Child labor or any other policy, as you said, we must have policy makers who have a lived-in experience. So if you don't have a government teacher in parliament, if you don't have a Kisan in parliament, how can you possibly make policies or a legislature that would benefit the vast population?
Reham came out with a hard-hitting tell-all autobiography in 2018. This made some strong insinuations against her former husband Imran Khan, speaking about Imran's personality, why the marriage was short-lived. The release came out just before the 2018 elections, and some of her detractors saw it as conveniently timed to derail Imran Khan and the PTI on their march to power.
Imran Khan has been in office for 4 years now, getting elected in 2018. If he finishes his 5-year term, he will become the first sitting prime minister to do so. Safe to say, Reham isn't his biggest fan, and she helped explain the various machinations in play in Pakistani politics and the complexity of the state's civil-military relations. After all, it has been said in most countries, the state has an army, but in Pakistan, the army has a state.
So again, I think to play devil's advocate for Imran here, like I said, the access to power, the access to power corridors, is what Imran had to take. So the compromises that he's had to make through his career and to get here, and then of course post getting to the prime minister's position, they are not dissimilar to what other parties might have had to do. Of course, he was a little bit more compromised because he is, in many ways, on his own here. So, to break the system of, say, hereditary politics, for example, I think he had to be a little bit more compromising. So, one thing is very clear that had he not made those compromises, he would not have made it to this position. There is no way. You are not allowed to play fair. I'm not condoning the fact that you should compromise. I'm just sort of painting the picture of how it happens in Pakistan. But also the problems that Naya Pakistan faces are not very different to what Purana Pakistan faced. And the reason is because we have the same faces. So the compromises that he made to get to power are really the reason why he cannot succeed, because you cannot you can't win the game with old hags, and that's what's happened here. It's been a regurgitation of the old system, so we don't see any new faces. Even if he had an intention of actually leaving a legacy, how can you do that with those tried and tested and failed faces? So he's not. Naya Pakistan is not very different to the previous 10 years. In fact, much worse, because at least they had been in power a few times. They had learned the system, so they could get a few things done. So, for example, if I was to compare it with Asif Ali Zardari's last tenure, a lot of people might have had problems with it, but he managed to deliver two things, or at least actually three things, which are almost like magic. And how he managed to deliver the 18th Amendment is anyone's guess. But I suppose he understood the system a little bit better, and so he sneaked in the 18th Amendment, which actually is the reason we have a little bit of democracy intact in Pakistan. Also, the 7th NFC award. How he managed to do that is, again, I mean, it's miraculous. But that actually has not only been good for his own party and for maintaining a government in his province, but also for the fact that we have some degree of independence in the parliament, at least, and we have a little bit more certainty of perhaps making it to a 5-year term, even if the prime minister has to go every 2 years, which, as you said, is traditional now for Pakistani politics. But I think the fact that Imran had to use electables because there was no way he could have made a government. It was a weak government to begin with. It's very easy to be blackmailed if you do not win, if you don't have the power of a majority behind you. And I feel that is by design. I feel that from the late 70s and into the 80s, there's been a concerted effort to make sure that there's mediocrity cultivated in politics. We don't have politicians who, have the ability that's required to turn the system around. We also have, the education standards have slipped. So I feel that by design we have been introduced to people who are willing to compromise, who do not have, they're not visionary politicians. They don't aim to leave a legacy. They're in for a short period of time, getting to the prime minister's chair or the chief minister's chair, and getting to just a very superficial level of power. And that's the model that is working in Pakistan. That is the model that has sadly been reinforced, sadly, by PTI, because I think they will live to, certainly Imran will live to regret it. And I think the only way out would have been had you really introduced democracy in the parties. So actually, none of the parties, when we talk about a democratic Pakistan, Can any of the parties hold up their hands and say that there is democracy within the parties? There's certainly not in the PTI, and there was a lot of criticism because they introduced the idea of intra-party elections back in 2012, 2013, and within the party there was a lot of criticism on the selection of the general secretary and other position holders. But that's also not the case in the other two major parties, the Pakistan People's Party or the PMLN. Cannot really, cannot really sort of brag about democracy within the party. And that, I think, needs to be addressed before we talk about democracy on a larger scale in the country.
For too long, Pakistani politics has been on tenterhooks. The late Benazir Bhutto once said, "Share the position of Prime Minister, but not the power." Islamabad is the political capital, but many see the real seat of power in the garrison town, the military headquarters of Rawalpindi.
Given Pakistan has had 4 military dictators and has spent more time under military rule than civilian rule, we asked if Imran Khan actually had sufficient political clout to execute his plans, or is he just a front for the military?
So really, in terms of what's happening in Pakistan, you see with the fact that who's running the show, I think there are no prizes for guessing who's running the show, and I explained why Imran had to do what he did, because that's the only way of surviving. You're not very liked if you disagree. If you have a point of view, if you have a brain of your own, you're not very liked, and so hence the Mujhe Kyun Nikala. And I popped in I think there was you can't question because the powers that be will not allow you to question, and you're absolutely right in understanding that it's not an internal pressure that we've always in Pakistan. Sadly, I feel that not to sort of pinpoint this on on the current regime or Imran. I think that Pakistan for a very long time has had to take sides, has had to take very extreme tilts, and I personally, I'm against that. I think that we did that with the Afghan war, with the Mujahideen, and then we did it again with the war on terror. And so we've always felt as if we have to take a very strong tilt towards one or the other superpowers. And I think that very much so, Imran has been caught up in this sort of crossfire as well, and he's no as much to blame as any pawn would, and I think that's, of course, I'm not defending him. People make these choices, so he was very clear about these choices. He could have chosen to sort of stay out of the game, but that was that is the choice that certain politicians will make. So he wasn't. I didn't really think that it would. That he would be going anywhere with this, and that was a risk that he was willing to take. And I think that in Pakistan currently, I feel and I fear that what Imran has started has been this trend of becoming so compromising that other people are willing now, as we speak, willing to step in and give their services and be a better puppet, a far more a flexible, player, particularly in terms of sort of very much. It's a micro issue, perhaps, if you look at it in India, but for us it isn't. That the Chief Minister Punjab's position is actually the main, the turf that everyone's fighting for.
It's long been said that no matter who's in power in Pakistan, the military is ultimately in charge. The belief that the mill establishment, or portmanteau of military and establishment, needs to keep the perception of the eternal enemy, that's India, burning and alive.
It's been said that Army Chief Qamar Javed Bajwa is a hard man to get a read on. Seen as softer than his predecessor Raheel Sharif, he initially stated that peace with India was the way forward. However, the media fraternity has complained about the muzzle and gag that the press faces. We asked Reham how she rates the current military setup as a journalist, and how does the availability of outlets like YouTube and social media affect the situation?
I can tell you that for years and years, Pakistani society, Pakistani youngsters, Pakistani families have had no hatred towards India. The hatred is in fact, the only time I sort of jokingly say this, that the only time we perhaps unite against India is during a cricket match, and so I think that there isn't any genuine hatred. I have a strong belief that Pakistanis are not as intolerant and not, the way they're portrayed by the media, not only by foreign media, but also our own media. We don't really hate Indians. I mean, we are obsessed with Bollywood films. I think many wives will leave their husbands for SRK. But seriously, though, textbooks and the media, we needed to hate the enemy. We need an enemy so that this is deflection politics. When you're not doing well in many areas, like the economy, like jobs, job creation, like education, you do need deflection tactics. So every country does that, and Pakistan has done it, sadly. But all of those aspirations for Ghazwa-e-Hind or whatever have fallen flat. Now, as Akshobh mentioned, the General Bajwa's doctrine has magically changed, and I, for one, welcome that. And I know a lot of Indian media and Indian friends doubt his sincerity, doubt his intentions. But I can tell you that the situation on the ground is that General Bajwa needs to promote peace, and I think that he is very, very sincere in making sure that the eastern border is all peaceful, because he has to focus on the western border. He has to focus on Afghan policy in the absence of a working democratic government, in the absence of shall we say, a sort of completely independent foreign ministry. The burden falls on his shoulders. This is why he's in Saudi today. This is not for, I don't believe for a minute this is for asking for money, as a lot of the Hindu Times and Chronicles are actually writing about. I think this is a little bit more deeper than that. And I think this is about regional powers realizing what is going to happen when the U.S. withdrawal of troops happens from May to September. So I think that the seriousness, yes, in India you could doubt the intentions, because these promises, as a lot of media voices are saying, have been made before, and we've heard them in General Musharraf's time as well. But I think the situation on the ground is completely, dramatically different. So General Bajwa, I, for one, believe that he means what he says. As far as media is concerned, if he did not mean what he said, then he wouldn't have taken on the criticism of all of us by calling 30 television anchors and giving them 5 to 7 hours of his time. I think the seriousness is this is evident of his seriousness. Of course, you will need a little bit more evidence in the days to come, and I for one am very hopeful. I think that all regional powers, particularly those who are immediate neighbors like India and Pakistan and Iran, must look at stability in Afghanistan, because stability in Afghanistan, peace in Afghanistan means peace and stability in our homes. Pakistan, of course, has a crucial, pivotal role to play here. But of course, with the interest of the regional superpower or the incoming superpower, shall we say, China, and of course Russia as well, wanting to take up the space that the US leaves, I think that we should really be looking at a European Union bloc sort of system, and I think that is what Bajwa is hinting at. And I know for a fact that a lot of my projects, a lot of my film projects, a couple of documentary projects were on hold because of all of this tension between India and Pakistan, and they've been delayed by 3 years now. So I've been getting a little bit of green signals to say, well, yes, now maybe we can sort of work on them from India to Afghanistan. Of course, sadly, we have COVID problems and issues, so it's going to be delayed by those issues. But I think that it's I would have preferred that there was a democratic government and the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister was leading this peace process. But it is what it is.
Reham's work is just like this conversation. It traverses the world of geopolitics, dealing with the political situation in Pakistan, a troubled relationship with a former spouse in power, diversity, advocacy, and the never-ending fight for justice.
And with that, we bring this episode of The Global Detail to a close. Join us next time for more conversations across an eclectic mix of subjects that reverberate around the world. This podcast has been a production of Karkata Media in association with Perspicacity Media LLC. If you have any questions, thoughts, or concerns, email us at globaldetailpodcast@gmail.com, or you can contact us on Facebook and Twitter at Global Detail Pod. This recording, or any portion thereof, may not be reproduced or used in any manner whatsoever without the express written permission of the publisher, except for the use of brief quotations in a review. Copyright 2022 by Karkata Media LLC. All rights reserved.